Hi, and welcome back to my channel. So I mentioned in my previous Star Wars video that I was going to talk about my favorite Star Wars movie this month, Return of the Jedi. So I finally have enough energy to do it. I kept saying I'm going to do this video, I'm going to do it, and then I kept getting sidetracked. So anyway, today I'm talking about Return of the Jedi, which is not only my favorite out of the original trilogy, it is also my favorite overall Star Wars movie. So I made notes. I'm going to try not to go on and on and on because much like my video about Revenge of the Sith, this is not going to be like a full review. It's just going to be things that stuck out again this time watching it around, because this past weekend I watched the original trilogy and it was really fun. Also because I have the VHSs from the special edition release from '97 and I still have a VHS player, so for nostalgia's sake, I watched it on VHS, except for Empire Strikes Back. I watched like half of it on VHS, and then because it's VHS and old, I ended up watching the other half on Disney Plus. But there's a couple of reasons why I like the original ones, and I will get to that in a little bit. So I got into Star Wars, which I mentioned, I believe, in my Phantom Menace video in '97. It was like the end of 5th grade for me, and they did the special re-release for the 20th anniversary of Star Wars. And Return of the Jedi was easily my favorite out of all of them at that time. I saw it multiple times in the theater. I don't know why it stuck with me as a kid, but it just, out of all of them, that one was my absolute favorite. And I had a friend, like I was in 5th grade, my friend was in 4th grade, we were in the after school care program, and she was into Star Wars too. And I remember at one showing with Return of the Jedi, because that was her favorite too, we ran into each other and we were coming out the theater and we were like, hey, we used to play Star Wars at school on the playground all the time. So like when you're in like the after school program, they kind of give you like a mini recess, and so like we'd be outside. And it's funny, I just remembered the other day thinking about this, there was this play structure that we used to call the big toy, because it had like all these things on it, slides, there was like a little drawbridge and just a whole bunch of things, but that's what we used to play on. And we used to act out scenes from Return of the Jedi. And I remember her acting out the scene where Princess Leia kills Jabba the Hutt, and I think I gave a very convincing portrayal of Luke Skywalker being electrocuted with dark force lightning from the Emperor. I was into it. I was really into it. But yeah, Return of the Jedi occupied a lot of my mind as a kid, and it has remained my favorite till this day. So, a couple of things to point out. When I was watching the original trilogy this weekend, up to and including Return of the Jedi, Han and Luke were like this. They were brothers in the way that, like I pointed out in my Revenge of the Sith video, I never got that kind of feeling from Obi-Wan and Anakin. But from the very beginning, like when Han comes to help Luke at the end of Star Wars and he's calling him kid, and the fact that he goes from being so skeptical of the Force earlier in the movie, and then before Luke is getting ready to go, blow up the Death Star, Han Solo says, "May the Force be with you." Now, where does that come from? You just were like introduced to him and Obi-Wan and the Force, and all of a sudden you're telling this dude, "May the Force be with you." And then at the end of Star Wars, now I tried to look this up, if the outfit that Luke Skywalker has at the end of Star Wars A New Hope is clothing he's borrowed from Han Solo. I like to believe it is. I like to believe that he's matured, he's no longer a farm boy, and Han Solo hooked him up with that outfit at the end of Star Wars. That is what I like to believe. Anyway, but again, that kind of friendship is definitely on display in Return of the Jedi, because Return of the Jedi opens up with Luke going to rescue Han Solo, and when they're leaving Tatooine, he says, "Hey, now I owe you one for saving his life," because he's already saved Luke twice. It's beautiful. It's beautiful to watch. Anyway, but in keeping with that, one of the things that I always loved about Return of the Jedi was how the opening sequence, you can already tell that Luke is on another level. When he rolls up on Jabba the Hutt's palace and like you see him in the robe, you don't see his face yet. He's using the Force. He just rolls up in there so cool. I mean, it's like I said, you can tell, okay, Luke is feeling himself. And then when he does the escape and he's doing the signal The lightsaber is ready, and R2-D2, he gets pushed into the pit, does the backflip right into it, catches the lightsaber. Just he was on another level. He was on another level in the all black, and I absolutely loved it. Which, by the way, really weird sidebar. Maybe not weird, but favorite. Hi, I'm back. So I had to take a quick break. Also, I hope the lighting stays pretty decent because it just got overcast real quick. It looks like it's about to rain. But where I left off, I was basically getting ready to say that I realized that as like a kid, I was a Luke Skywalker girl. Like I had a crush on Luke Skywalker and not Han Solo. And it's funny because I did have a crush on Indiana Jones as a kid. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, it's the same actor who does Han Solo and Indiana Jones. It's different somehow because I was a nerd. So like nerdy Professor Indiana Jones was more attractive to me than swashbuckler Han Solo. Luke Skywalker was who I had a crush on. But anyway, because since I'm talking about Return of the Jedi, I was definitely feeling him in the all black. Anyway, so next point that I wanted to talk about in Return of the Jedi is Luke's ability to save his father in a way that Anakin wasn't able to save his mother. Like, they're both they're slightly different because, you know, Anakin was being tortured with visions of his mother dying. So it's definitely different to, like, Luke being able to see that there was some good left in his father. But nevertheless, for me, it's like a full circle moment of his father not being able to save his own mother, but Luke being able to see past Darth Vader and everything and see that his father, Anakin, was still in there, and to bring him out is kind of like a full circle moment of he was finally able to save a parent in that family. So I just thought that was really great that Luke, even though he felt like this, you know, extreme betrayal, obviously at the end of Empire Strikes Back, you know, where he kept saying, Ben, why didn't you tell me, once he finds out Darth Vader is his dad, but how also like immediately he just like accepts it, and even when it's like confirmed by Yoda, he's like, okay, like he still doesn't have like, I don't know, like a vengeful attitude about it. He really still can feel and sense that there's something there left to redeem, and I just love that. Also, I really like the conversation that Luke and Leia have, where he basically reveals to her that they're twins and that Darth Vader is their father, because it's such a like a very poignant, like just it's a lovely moment in the whole entire series. And I just think it's so interesting that Leia's the one with the memory of their mother, but Luke is the one that found out who their father was first and has been carrying around that burden. And like the way he kind of like eases her into it, where he tells her that Darth Vader is his father first, before then telling her that she's his sister. And then now she's just, obviously she's putting these things together that means Darth Vader is her father too. But I don't know, it's just so interesting, that whole sequence of them talking about their parents and talking about what Luke is about to do. And you know, you don't really get like a whole lot of moments where they're actually talking about the reality of them being twins and Darth Vader being their father and their capabilities in the Force and all of that. It's just, I don't know. And I love the music that's playing. It's just such a good scene to me. And I really enjoyed watching it, you know, this time around. Now, the other thing that I noticed is that, like I mentioned in Revenge of the Sith in that video, that it never felt like Anakin was fully aware of his purpose as the chosen one. And it also never felt like he really had any free will in whether he wanted to be that type of like messianic figure. But Luke kind of is given that responsibility without even knowing it, because he's the one that's able to, you know, kind of be self-sacrificing for the greater good, to see the bigger picture, to see the good left in his father. And so in a way, to me, he was like the chosen one without the burden of being told he was the chosen one. You know, yeah, he's told, like, you know, then he'll, like when Yoda died, he said, you're the last of the Jedi. So yeah, he has that burden of, you're the last one with like knowledge of who we are as Jedi, but I just feel like all the pressure that was on his father in that structure of the Jedi, Luke is kind of freed from that. And because he's freed from that, like rigidity and following the rules, I think that's why he's so easily able to see that there's still something in his father. Because you kind of think, had he been trained as a Jedi under the previous system, he may not even been willing to go that deep and see that in his father, So I just think that's interesting. Like, he kind of had his own journey to being the chosen one, but with a lot more freedom and a lot less burden than Anakin had, where it felt like it was just thrust upon him, and he really didn't understand the whole point of like bringing balance to the Force and like all of that. So yeah. Now the other thing that I thought was interesting is Obi-Wan and Yoda kept warning Luke, do not underestimate the Emperor, do not underestimate his powers, or else you're gonna end up like your dad. And what's so interesting about that is the Emperor really thought that he had it like all figured out, because the thing that's weird to me, or that's interesting both at the same time, is that as soon as Darth Vader and Luke figure out that they're related, Darth Vader figures out that's his son, Luke figures out that's his father, there's something that they both just connect with that other people around them can't get in. And when Darth Vader comes to tell the Emperor that he knows that the rebels have landed and that his son is with him, and the Emperor was like, "Are you sure?" And he's like, "Yes, I felt his presence." And the Emperor was like, "Strange that I haven't." That's not your kid. Like, it's the arrogance of the Emperor. Like, why would you? That's not your child. Okay? So, and it kind of makes me think about the scene then when Luke is brought before him. And I think he says, like, your overconfidence is your weakness. And the Emperor says, your faith in your friends is yours. And it's like, yeah, you really don't get it, do you? And I think that's the interesting thing about how the Emperor, because again, what is kind of like the theme in the prequels and the trilogy is, attachment to friends and family and personal connections can lead to the dark side if you are afraid of losing them. And I think what's interesting is what made it more tempting for Anakin was the deeply personal relationship he had with the people he was afraid of losing, a parent, his mother, and then his wife that he's known since he was like a child. As opposed to Luke, when he thinks that he's going to lose Han and Leia in Empire Strikes Back, at that point, he doesn't know that Leia is his sister. Those are just his newfound family, right? And then in Return of the Jedi, when the Emperor thinks that him watching the whole entire rebellion be destroyed is like enough to make him turn to the dark side, it's like a very narrow view of what the rebellion was. It's like, because they kept interpreting the Empire, that is, kept interpreting the rebellion as the ships that are coming to attack them, the X-Wings and all of that. And it's like, that is just an instrument or a part of the rebellion, but true resistance and rebellion is all of the people working together against that system. It's like, it's not just the group of rebels that have come to actually confront you face on. It's like, it's everybody in the galaxy who doesn't want to live under a dictatorship anymore. All of them are the resistance. All of them are the rebellion. So the fact that he really was so arrogant in thinking, hey, we're just going to blow him up and that'll be that. That's why he fails, in my opinion. And he really was overconfident. And Luke was right. You just a little bit too arrogant. You don't really truly understand who we are as the Rebel Alliance and what we're willing to sacrifice, for us to be free. And then my absolute favorite, my favorite lightsaber battle is the battle between Luke and Darth Vader, because obviously it's instigated because Luke is feeling all these emotions of anger as he's seeing the rebels be attacked. But there's just something so deeply emotional about how they are fighting, but at every turn Luke is finding this like self-control and restraint and realizing that you're not just fighting Darth Vader. You're not just fighting, somebody who's using the dark side of the Force. This is literally your father. It's like that was so forefront in his mind in a way that if you compare that to my other favorite lightsaber battle with like Obi-Wan and Anakin, like Anakin kept saying Obi-Wan was like his father. But even that type of relationship wasn't enough to give him pause because he was so far gone. But with Luke, knowing that Darth Vader was his actual father, just kept giving him, like, you know, I will not fight you, father. Like, it kept him held back from truly giving in to those emotions until he is threatened with the idea of his actual relative. Now he knows that Leia is his sister, being turned to the dark side. So again, it seems like the way to get at people is to get like to the more personal relationships, like a family member. But then that, you know, prompts this just beautiful sequence, in my opinion, when they're fighting and you can kind of see them moving like through the bottom of like the Death Star, and that music, and you kind of hear like that choir. It's just, I love it. Every time I see it, I love it. And in his anger, you know, Luke Skywalker cuts off Darth Vader's hand in his lightsaber, and it's like, again, his self-control, once he realizes, he looks at his own mechanical hand and is like, okay, I have reached the point where I'm faced with like the same decision that my father had. It's just, I cannot do it. And then, of course, you know, Luke hits us with, to me, is the best line ever, where he tells the Emperor that he's failed, and he says, I'm a Jedi, like my father before me. I remember I saw that in the trailer as a kid for Return of the Jedi. I was like, that's a bad line. And I still love it to this day, because it just totally like encapsulates how much Luke understood what his new legacy was. Like, you are a Jedi. You're going to be the one to rebuild, you know, who the Jedi are or were. And it's just, like I said, just the whole pacing of that fight, the way that it ends with him showing mercy on his father. And then, of course, then that transitions into Darth Vader's willingness to sacrifice himself, basically, because he knows at this point he's going to die, and stopping the Emperor from killing his son. Such an emotional moment, especially, I mean, it's already emotional before, if you saw it before the prequels came out, but it's even more emotional when you see the prequels, to understand that he's like literally looking at his child that he had with Padme and seeing him being tortured, and he just can't do it anymore, and he kills the Empire, not the Empire. Well, the Empire does fall, but he kills the Emperor. And by the way, when the Emperor gets thrown down that shaft, as far as I'm concerned, that's it. I don't know anything about an Emperor coming back. I don't know anything about him surviving. He's dead. He's dead. And I'm sticking to that. Anyway, the other thing I kind of like about that is that because that's like his final act, Darth Vader, then you see him kind of get like this hero's burial, because he's buried the same way we've seen the other Jedi be buried, like Qui-Gon Jinn at the end of Phantom Menace. And it's like, again, it's something that was already emotional before the prequels, but now that you know that that's like the way that they bury Jedi, it's like Luke honoring his father one last time by giving him that type of burial. And then, of course, you know, in the special edition, that scene transitions into a victory scene across the galaxy now that the Empire has been destroyed. And that brings me back to the fact that in the original one, all we see is the Ewoks celebrating on Endor. And the Ewoks are special to me, just like the Gungans are special to me, because again, it's that underestimating an indigenous population. You know, you're looking at them like, oh, they teddy bears. They, you know, what are they gonna do? They whooped y'all's behind, didn't they? With rocks. And like spears and stuff. And it's like, again, it's that messaging of, this is their home. They're indigenous to this moon. And you just rolled up in there and you thought that you were in control of everything, and they outsmarted you and they beat you and they helped the rebels. And again, the same way in Phantom Menace, how they had to come to the Gungans for help. In Return of the Jedi, yeah, you got to rely on the Ewoks, because whose home is it? It's the Ewoks. So to me, no matter how, you know, trivial or childish people think the Gungans or the Ewoks are, it kind of is like a parallel for how actual human beings viewed other human beings who were indigenous as childlike and ignorant and don't understand things in their own home. So that's why, personally, for me, I will always have respect for the Ewoks and the Gungans, because again, with their primitive weapons and everything, they were still able to take down the Empire. So props to the Ewoks. And then, like I mentioned, because I watched this on VHS, in the original Star Wars, the one from back in '83 and the special edition, the actor who was actually in the Darth Vader suit is the one that comes back as the Force ghost of Anakin in the end with Obi-Wan and Yoda. And then I didn't know this for a while, that in 2004, I think, is when they changed it to Hayden Christensen as Anakin. So in the newer versions, like if you watch it on Disney Plus, and I'm assuming if you watch it like maybe on DVD or Blu-ray, you're gonna get the version of Hayden Christensen, like the younger Anakin. And I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say I don't like that. I get what they're trying to do with that by saying that, like, because he, you know, had turned back to the light before he died, that he kind of reverts back to his previous self prior to turning to the dark side in the afterlife. But the reason why I don't like that is it's kind of like erasing the fact that you did turn to the dark side. Like, we're not erasing that you did actually turn into Darth Vader and you did do all those horrible things. And by the way, before you got your butt burnt up, you did all those things while looking like that, while looking like Hayden Christensen. You were the one that rolled up on the Jedi Temple and killed younglings while looking like that. You were the one that went to Mustafar and was messing people up looking like that. So I kind of feel like making it revert back to his younger self as if that's not what he looked like when he was already Darth Vader before he got burnt up kind of erases that. And so I like that it's, and, you know, in the original version, it's the older actor, because to me that's more realistic, that you've lived this like life of like imprisonment by being Darth Vader and turning to the dark side. But now in like your final rest in the Force, that version of you is at peace. That version, you've kind of aged into, this is what you were supposed to look like. You know, you were supposed to grow into an old man, a Jedi, and be with the Jedi that trained you, Yoda and Obi-Wan. But that's just, you know, that's my personal opinion. And I just like the idea because that's the man that Luke encountered. You know, it's like Luke helped release like his soul in order to be able to have that afterlife. And considering that when he says, like, you know, let me look at you with my own eyes, and the face that Luke sees is that older man, he doesn't see the Hayden Christensen version. He saved that older version. I don't know. Just a preference. But yeah, I'm done. Like I said, I wasn't going to do like a real deep review. It's just those are things that like I was thinking about watching it this time, or that I really enjoyed this time around watching Return of the Jedi. But yeah, still my favorite every time I watch it. And you know, I'm one of those people. Now, I didn't know this, but like the books that came out like in the 90s and stuff were called Star Wars Legacy, because it used to be called Star Wars The Expanded Universe, but I think now they call it Star Wars Legacy. Now, my bookshelf is over there with a lot of those books. And so for me, I still have like an attachment to those books, even though I know they're not canon. And like I said in my other video, it's hard for me to really keep up with like all these TV shows, because I've heard that Andor is good, but it's just like, I don't know. There's some kind of comfort for me in just thinking, like I said, that it begins and ends with those prequels and the original trilogy for me. And that's not to say that people can't enjoy any of the rest of it, because plenty of people do. It's just, for me, Return of the Jedi will always be the definitive end, and it is my favorite. And yeah, so this is my last Star Wars video for now. Who knows if I'll circle back to anything, but this will be my last one for this month of May. Like I said, this Star Wars month, and I hope you enjoyed my take on my favorite Return of the Jedi.